It's a wild world out there, but some worlds are even wilder. Hi, my name is Tyler Hapney, and you're listening to Dungeons and Dystopias. Thank you for listening. Hello, and welcome to yet another episode of Dungeons and Dystopias. I am still in another room because I think the computer that I was originally recording on is having some issues. And I am having some trouble getting around and doing things kind of, figuring this out. It's a process to sit down and record every week now, which is, it's a thing. So anyways, welcome back to Dungeons and Dystopias. My name is Tyler Hapney. I'm your host and game master. I have run a very large amount of Cyberpunk and D&D sessions. I used to say over 200, but now it's probably getting closer to 200 of Cyberpunk RED alone. So really, I've just run a lot of these games. And today, I'd like to talk a little bit about some stuff we've gotten for Cyberpunk RED. I mentioned this last week, but I figured now would probably be a good time to discuss this because I don't think we've talked a lot about Elflines. Well, spoiler alert! I don't think we've talked a lot about this in general for Cyberpunk RED, and I want to talk, as I mentioned, about Elflines Online. And to anyone who's not in the know, that might be kind of confusing. We're talking about Cyberpunk, but we're talking about something called Elflines. What is Elflines? Well, in the Cyberpunk universe, as they have a version of so many different other things, they also have a version of their own in-universe MMORPG, and that is called Elflines. The basic gist of Elflines is you're playing an elf in the Elven lands and you're doing MMO stuff. MMORPG. Like World of Warcraft or Guild Wars or any of those other 50 different MMORPGs out there that basically all play the same. But, end of the day, Cyberpunk's got its own version of that. And they have put so much effort into developing Elflines as its own sort of standalone kind of thing that you could theoretically have an entire Cyberpunk campaign in Elflines. You don't even really need to touch Night City, technically. I mean, obviously it's way more fun if you do, but you really could just have it be, your group only meets online on Elflines to do raids or whatever. And that would be cool. It's a very different type of campaign from Cyberpunk, but it's still Cyberpunk nonetheless. Because of the way Elflines is kind of constructed, there's always sort of that reminder that, these are all people from Night City. Not necessarily just the world, but very importantly, Night City. Because that place sucks and, people whatever. Anyways, the important part about Elflines is that it also provides very interesting story beats for your players to potentially interact with. For instance, it is said that items in Elflines can be traded for real currency, Eurodollars, on the market and on the street. So that already creates potential for missions where you have to go get an Elflines item or something, like steal it from some coder or something. And that's kind of a fun mission, nothing, I guess, too serious if you're just going for one of the best swords in Elflines, It's like, I mean, some people would be willing to die for that, but I don't think it'd be a 2,000 Eurodollar high impact sort of crazy risk mission. But you never know. Some people could be really crazy for their Elfline stuff. But as of now, we have received like 3 or 4 different Elflines DLCs entirely dedicated to Elflines. That's pretty crazy. I have had one of my players mention to me that at this point, they should just do an entire Elflines book. Half of it could just be the DLC they've made. I mean, the most recent DLC they released, the one we're going to be talking about mostly today, is Magic Returns, and that is on its own 42 pages. That's crazy. for free DLC. Usually these things are like, like on the long end, like 20 pages or so. But this is 42 pages. And it's not 42 pages of nothing. A lot of this stuff it changes the way you play Elflines. It adds an entirely new skill to Elflines. It adds like 20 different spells. I don't know how many spells it adds, but it adds quite a lot. And it looks like it's way more than 20. It's insane the amount of stuff that they have put in to Elflines to make it its own thing, different from Cyberpunk, but still using the Cyberpunk skills and that sort of system, the interlock system. Anyways, let's kind of get into Elflines. Enough about me yapping here over and over about Elflines. Let's actually talk a little bit about this DLC. So I'll just preface this by saying you can look through all the different DLCs. There are actually 5 of them. Now that I'm looking at it, we've got the original Elflines Online DLC, the first expansion pack, a guide to Elflines Online, which gives you kind of a guide of all the zones and monsters and stuff you can run into. And then they even made a trading card game for Elflines Online. Really, truly, they made a trading card game for Elflines. That's like Caravan in Fallout New Vegas. It's like, now I have a card game that I can put into my universe as well, which seems to be something that a lot of people really appreciate. I'm not one for card games personally, but man, it is nice to have that option. So Magic Returns is, it's what it says on the tin. Magic Returns to Elflines Online. The general idea with this whole thing is that there's this thing called, or these creatures called miasmelves. And obviously, miasma at Elflines Online is this super huge force. It's like magic and chaos. It's all sorts of stuff. But these are elves that have been imbued with the miasma, and these are AI controlled elves, supposedly. Supposedly, and they're basically going to be sort of these special enemies that have magic and stuff. And when you kill a miasmelf, you get the spellstone that the miasmelf was holding. Fun stuff. What is a power stone, you might ask? Well, or spellstone, excuse me. Well, that's kind of the big thing about this. So spellstones are these things that you can loot or find or even buy in Elflines Online, and you can attune to a spellstone. And when you tune to a spellstone, you are going to be able to cast 2 basically spells. Spells basically chosen at random. And a lot of these spells are pretty crazy. Some of them are really, really, really good. Some of them, I don't know. It'd be okay. For instance, the Blessing of Arvish. This one's a fun one. In Elflines, casting magic costs health points. However, with this Blessing of Arvish, it does cast 3 health points to cost, but the next 2 spells have no HP cost. So long as they are cast by the end of the target's next turn. So you buff somebody with this, and then on their next turn they can cast 2 spells, no HP cost, which is great. It's really great. And then you've got some other really interesting ones like Dragon Strike. I like this one. If it's an HP cost of 3, or if your spellstone is corrupted, an HP cost of 5. It deals 3d6 damage, and it lights people on fire. And if they fail on a magic check, which is a new skill that you get when you attune to your first spellstone, failure means you are now unable to cast spells until the end of your next turn. So that could effectively be a silence as well. And that's just the standard version of Dragon Strike. There is an enhanced version of many of these spells as well. So the enhanced version HP cost of 5, 7 if the caster's spellstone is corrupted. This is still Dragon Strike. It deals 46 damage, and it'll light people strongly on fire if it hits. Same DV for the magic check, but very much a much better version of that spell. We'll go over one or two more spells here before we continue. I don't want to talk about all the magic, but there's quite a lot here. This one is fun. Hate Shock. This has a normal and enhanced version. This comes in a beam or a ray, and this is basically just kind of your standard attack or your sort of standard damage. Hate Shock deals 5d6 damage or 66 if it's enhanced. It has no element connected to it. It's just a straight ray of negative emotions. You beam your hate into your target's soul. Isn't that cool? Obviously, there are like healing spells and buffs and all that type of stuff that you can really build all these different types of builds and sort of kind of structure your character differently depending on what spells you have. I have a player who built their character to be specifically made for healing because they bought a spellstone and got access to healing ability. So stuff like that. They've also got a really interesting one. Walk Elfline. This does, of course, have standard and enhanced, as all spells really do at this point. I'm pretty sure they all do, at least. Walk Elflines allows you and a couple of extra targets to teleport to a space next to a member of the caster's Elfline, chosen by the caster. And cannot be cast in combat. So, you could basically just teleport up to a friend as long as you're not in combat. Someone who's in the same Elfline as you. Pretty neat, pretty cool. A lot of different really cool spells. There's True Flight. This one enhances your archery. Stuff like that. Fun times. All this different type of magic. And, of course, what Elflines DLC would be complete without giving us a whole bunch of new monsters to look at. We have some bestiary. These are all miasma elves. Not a single beast in here is not a miasma elf. So you at least get to see all these different cool spellstones that people have, and it actually tells us which spellstones the creatures in question have, and which spells they come along. They even have like the spellstones are named, like the No Stone spellstone. This one has Erase Injury, Floating Shield, and Magic Ward, and that's just something you loot from the skirmisher. I'm assuming all skirmishers probably have the same one, which is pretty cool. And obviously, as this goes on, we get some enemies that have 3 different spellstones, and we can choose one of the 3 to kind of give them. There is that sort of, I guess, variation that you can have in your very specific play style, play group, or whatever you're going for. This one is interesting. The Miasma Elf Knight Captain possesses the Mozifus Medi spellstone, enhanced Erase Injury, Magic Dance, and Siphon Stone, but they also are wearing something called Shadow Plate. And Shadow Plate is stopping power 15, which is crazy for Elflines, especially considering most players start with like stopping power 7. Wearing it does not inflict any stat penalties. And the armor repairs to full stopping power whenever the wearer suffers a critical injury. That is insane. That really adds a lot of longevity to this specific creature, the Miasma Elf Knight Captain. Really interesting concept there. I wonder if, not to mention, it has 60 health points. Like, wow. It's just a very scary creature to be going up against. But, we also have the Miasma Elf Warlord, the Miasma Elf Dragon Rider, miasma elf dragon mount. So you get the dragon rider and the dragon mount. They're both fighting probably at the same time. And I imagine that to be a hell of a time. Really, truly, honestly. And it's really something. I think we actually can go into this last creature and make this last creature an actual monster of the week. This is not a metaphorical monster of the week. This is a very actual, real life monster. I guess you could also say metaphorical as well, but we are going to be talking about the miasmatasm. This is where it all started from. This miasma elf stuff. You might think, yeah, the Elflines developers put that in, of course. Well, maybe not. The last creature from the Magic Returns DLC is not an Elflines Online monster. It is an AI, a rabbit, which I believe I've talked about on this stream before during the Fourth Corporate War. Maybe, maybe not. Either way, rabbits are sentient AIs, most of which have no regard for human life, and in fact would like to not have human life really be bothering them much at all. There's a lot more that goes into being a rabbit. Like, we could talk about Rage Bartmoss for hours. Might have to make him a metaphorical monster of the week, but what we are going to be talking about, however, is the miasmatasm. This is interesting. It possesses a miasma elf at a time. And you can identify the miasma elf that is possessed by the miasmatasm by their eyes, which vomit a glowing purple gas. The only way to attack the miasmatasm within Elflines is to attack whoever it's possessing. And here's the best part. While its miasma elf host is within 50 meters of a player's elf, it may jack into any net architecture within 50 meters of that player's Segatari Rush Revolution, so the actual playing console, for as long as that Segatari Rush Revolution remains intact and within 50 meters of the net architecture. So this thing can travel through the net. Through using Elflines, this thing can travel from one person's Segatari Rush Revolution and go into yours as an action. That's rough. That's really rough. If a player's Segatari Rush Resolution is moved out of range of the net architecture or is destroyed, the miasmatasm is then safely jacked out of the net architecture. So you can't even like trap it in a Rush Revolution and then, you know, move it to like a junkyard somewhere. No, if you move it out, it jacks out and it's totally fine. It's still back in Elflines Online. And of course, it does automatically succeed at all backdoor breach checks. It is unaffected by viruses and cannot be unsafely jacked out of the net architecture, cannot be set on fire, cannot have its stats lowered, and it cannot have its programs destroyed. That's insane. This thing is really crazy, and if I were a netrunner running around Elflines, just the thought that this thing might come at me, it might be enough to make me stop playing Elflines in general. This thing is rough, man. Yeah. When controlling a control node, the miasmatasm can operate the connected devices as if it had a base 16 to any associated skill check. So, you know, comment number 16, that's awesome. It is also immune to all penalties caused by wound states, except the need to make death saves and death itself. So it can still die. However, it is interface 8. It makes all of these things at 16 skill. This is, like, if you run into this thing, this is like a boss of Elflines, sort of. I mean, it is labeled a boss, but this is like a real life boss. If you die in the video game, you die in real life kind of stuff. It's scary almost to think that this is out there in the Elflines, just sort of possessing players one by one, and well, I guess making the whole of the system kind of come to its heel. And of course, I didn't mention this earlier, but this DLC does set up the fact that the Elflines developers are cutting back on staff and are in fact replacing developers with shoddy AI tech. So of course there's not going to be a lot to stop the miasmatasm from continuing to spread and make everything so much worse. Isn't that comforting and encouraging? That'll be it for us this week. Thank you so much for listening to me talk about Elflines. Next week we will be talking about Dungeons and Dragons, or I might even have a guest in. Once again, that's kind of up in the air because I'm still trying to figure out how to get this going. So, we'll get there when we get there. Thank you so much for listening. I will see you all next week.